direct. So I think yes, because it's easier. It's when I have to Skype.
Yes, it takes a lot of time to record. Are we live?
Yes. So yeah, you are live, but not worry. In this channel, English channel, there are not many guests. So because in other channel, sometimes there is 100 people who are watching live. But in English, it is only not many Polish people who speak English. But I hope that after it will change. So we are with Maria Czernat, with Romani from the Barricade channel, Barricade Synth Internet, and we will speak about the feminism and the elite. And so the starting part of our conversation is the new president of the United States, Vice President Kamala Harris, which before she was feminist, and many feminists in the United States and the Western countries now they are very proud that the women are in the White House, like vice president. So Maria.
Hello. Good to be here again on your YouTube live stream. My name is Maria Czernat. I teach it at two universities here in Bucharest. This is my main occupation, so to speak, the main job that I do. I teach in a communication and public relations department at Titu Maiorescu and also at the National School of Political Sciences and Public Administration in Bucharest. But I also find time, because I think it's vital to find time also to amplify the messages and to reach to the masses or to the public with the ideas that you have, not to stay in your little ivory tower and not speak with the public. So this is why I started working with Bojan Stanislavski, a Polish-based journalist who is from Bulgaria but moved there with his parents, and Vladimir Mite from the Barricade. And what we are doing, as I said the last time I was invited to your show, is to provide a critical perspective and analysis on events that happen in Eastern Europe, basically Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, and sometimes Hungary. Now, I had an event because you are, and I'm very happy to have you as one of our viewers. So we had an event hosted by the Barricades where we invited a professor of political science, Alben Azmanova from Kent University. And we discussed this new hype, this new enthusiasm that was created by the recent election of Kamala Harris as Vice President of the United States. And while Albena Azmanova focused on the theoretical and on the political context that prompted this type of enthusiasm, because she wrote a very interesting piece, and if you allowed me, I will provide the viewers with the references, with the articles and the books that we based on our analysis. So she was our main speaker, and she discussed how this type of feminism that was very popular since the 70s in the United States is somehow a success by failure. You should be aware that in feminist theoretical field, there are a lot of debates and a lot of fights. Because even though we wear, velvet mittens, not the ones that Bernie Sanders carries, but very nice ones, we are often at each other's throats on things like liberal feminism or socialist feminism. And there was a huge debate, for instance, between Nancy Fraser, who is a promoter of socialist feminism, and Judith Butler, who is more of a postmodern feminist and a more liberal feminist. So Albina Asmanova is on the side of socialist feminism. Now let us discuss, because, you know, ever since in 1798, when Fourier and other pioneers of the feminist movement started to write, there was this debate, you know, Michal, between what is more important for women: individual rights, I mean, the right to property, the right to work, the right to divorce, the right to leave your house, the right to abortion, or is it more important to have a look at women as an oppressed class and tackle things like inequality, equal payment, but not only equal payment, but solidarity with men in order to change the capitalist system and to have women with men in workers' co-ops, for instance, you know, a more radical idea. Now, this was present even if in the 19th century, because we have very important feminist writers even then. I edited a book of one of Romania's socialist feminists, a prominent one, that is Sofia Nădejde, that wrote in the 19th century. And she said, why would we imagine that if rich men do nothing for poor men, that rich women will do more for poor women, you know? So she posed initially, even though she wrote in the second half of the 19th century, this very essential question for feminism. Are you going, and she literally says that if we aim only for the right to vote, that during that time was allowed for rich people, we are going to take our sides and we are not going to think about the mass of the women, you know, and we are going to be some rich, spoiled, privileged women that only think about themselves, you know. This is very interesting that even then there was this problem. Now, even liberal feminism was a step forward. We must admit that. I mean, compared to the 19th century and compared to the situation at the beginning of the century, where women had no right to divorce, to own property, to work, to have an equal education. Even in Romania, for instance, they had access to education, but they received an education that was tailored to their brains. That is, they learned to sew, they learned to paint, they learned to recite French poetry, because it was taught. And we had a very conservative intellectual that said that basically women are inferior because they have a smaller head and a smaller brain, you know, because quantity always equals quality, isn't it? So it has to be big, the brain, in order to be intelligent. And it was Sofia Nădejde that replied and said, well, judging by this criterion, it means that the whales who have the largest brain should be the most intelligent one. Now, leave that aside. Coming back to our discussion, you know, this division that was present right from the beginning in feminist writings is nowadays more clear than ever. And unfortunately, even though we had huge progress in terms of individual rights, we only have this type of progress. Let me explain. So we gain the right to vote. We gain the right to own property. We gain the right to be the equal of men in an unequal world and to own equal shares of inequality, as Nancy Fraser said, you know? But nowadays, it became clearer that it would be more interesting not to liberate ourselves only from the oppression of men, but to work with men to liberate ourselves from the larger context and systems of oppression that is capitalism and to work with them in order to change a world that is so exploitative, alienating, and oppressive to all of us, you know. And to see that this type of successes, you know, to enter the labor force, it was very important. But at the same time, it was in the best interest of the elites, who suddenly gained access to a more obedient, to a more, how should I say, passive working force that were women, and they could pit them against men, you know. And it was by the time, because it is very interesting what happened in the United States. In the United States, after the war, women were encouraged to go back into the home and give birth to children, because a lot of men died during World War II. So they were encouraged to go back. Go back from where? Go back from the workplace, because they were during the World War II encouraged to go and work and feel, you know, that need for workers, because men were in Europe fighting the World War II, so they needed women to step out and fill their places. Now, after the World War II, it is very interesting that the rhetoric changed. They wanted to convince them to go home. And it is very interesting, if you see, there is a wonderful, wonderful movie, Mona Lisa Smile, that tackles this issue of how society became extremely violent against women, promoting in advertising women happily waiting for their husbands with a tray of, you know, food or cookies, women baking, women in fashion clothes, you know, this idea that the place of a woman is in the house. And they even had television debates in the 50s, I mean, in the 50s in the United States, saying that women should not be allowed to attend college, because their main goal in the American society is to attend to their husband's needs and to take care of the children. Had they attended college, they might have become bored, because they would have too much intelligence and nothing to do with it. So the good thing is to literally cut this opportunity to ban them from even attending college. Can you imagine? So there were very dark times for the feminist movement, or for women, especially in the United States, and nobody's talking about it. Now, what happened was that, of course, women rebelled. Women rebelled, and you imagine that were those women that protested against beauty contests, against all these ideals that society imposed on women, that they should be, you know, proper, beautiful, and tending to their husband needs. And they rebelled. This is the second wave feminism. The first wave was about gaining rights. Now, this was the second one. But what happened here is that in 1950, let us not forget that the CIA was founded. And they started working. And one of their projects was to transform the feminist movement from a class movement into a women's only movement, and to a movement that would be in the best interest of the elites. And they promoted this idea that women should go and work, that women should be the equals of men. And it was right about the time that the wages started to go on a flat, you know, started to flatten. And we know that starting from the 70s and the 80s, the median wage in the US hasn't risen. It is very interesting. And it is about then that the men were no longer able to support the family. So the solution of the establishment, with the help of the CIA, was to have a feminism that would tell women to go out and work because it is for their independence. And while this is perfectly true, who gets to stay home and take care of the children? There is a book and interesting research made of this care drain. As you have brain drain, now we have care drain. I mean, women that come from the global south that are hired by these powerful women to take care of their children, because fundamentally in the family, nothing changed. You had two men. You haven't got a revolution that would give women like 5 years maternity leave, that would give them subsidies and help and financial support for this reproductive labor, for raising children. They should be compensated, Nobody thinks about this. Their work is always taken for granted, and the only work that is being recognized in the capitalist system is the one that is done in public, not the one that is done at home. Even though, as you probably know, since you have a young child right now, you have parental responsibility, even though you know how important that is for the society and how difficult that is. And it is not compensated. It is taken for granted and considered the devotion of the mother. It is labeled and packaged into very beautiful words in order to, in order to hide the fact that you are not compensated for this very important work. So basically, the influence of the CIA and this individual that was Gloria Steinem. Now, the chapter of Gloria Steinem, who is she? She's a very influential feminist. She's a feminist icon. She is beautiful, she is smart, talented, but interestingly enough, she was a CIA operative. And this was revealed from 1975. By the Restocking Collectives, and there was a book that was supposed to be published, and she used all the influence that this chapter on her would not be published. But it was revealed that she was a CIA operative. Now, on her defense, she says that back then the CIA was not so bad, which I find a little bit hilarious, given the fact that the CIA has the reputation that it has, like any other secret service, but they are exceptionally, how should I say, they're exceptional in this field, since their name is related to one of the most evil deeds ever occurring in recent history. So she said that back then she thought of the CIA as a liberal force. Now we should take that into the context. Let me explain why. Right after the war, there was this us versus them mentality. And while I do not take at face value her declaration and her statement, there is a little grain of truth in it. I mean, I believe that she honestly believes she is helping her country when she signed the agreement with the CIA, because after the war, there was this us versus them mentality, this idea that you have to defend your country, and people were very vulnerable to this type of propaganda that you have to defend our country because look what happened in the World War II, and now Joseph Stalin is going to come and he's going to do all bad things to us. And Americans were very vulnerable. I can understand that, to this type of propaganda that a huge monster is going to come after us and we have to defend ourselves. This always works, it works right now because they found the terrorists, Putin, and all sorts of enemies that they want to use in order to get the American people to accept all sorts of controversial things. But that was in the beginning, and the trauma of the World War II was very important. So I can understand, like 5% of what she says. I mean, because I do believe that maybe in the beginning she really thought she was doing a good thing. She was not, because she used this very a very important media platform that she has, Miss Magazine, that is, you probably don't know it because it is widely read by feminists and by women all over the world. And it was being backed with CIA's money. This is at least what Harriet Fraud said numerous times, and she labels herself as one of the founding mothers of the women's liberation movement. And it is very popular, and this is where she popularized this idea of what I call glamour feminism, you know, not feminism for the masses, but feminism for the privileged ones that now are going to run, you know, and become the vice president of the United States, that are going to become CEO of the digital giants, that are going to become CEO of main weapon manufacturers, you know. So we leave the status quo. What is the problem with this? Because you might feel, and we have to be very careful here, because women have been oppressed for so long, then if you tend to criticize some of these progresses, most of them would feel offended, and you have to be very careful when you discuss these things. Of course, it is great we have these women all over the place, but the problem with this is that the world and the hierarchy stays the same, only you change the elements. You don't have only men there, you have women, but the power structure stays exactly the same. It's like you're rejoicing, and I'm exaggerating right now, I don't want to offend anyone, but it's like you're rejoicing and you're cheering up because now the head of the mafia is a woman, you know, and the mafia stays, but you are very happy that it is no longer a man who's in charge, but a woman, even though that organization is killing people. And you have now, let's say, you are happy because the number of serial killers that are women is bigger than the one that are men. You know, this type of, how should I say, very simplistic way of viewing women's progress is leading us, in my perspective, into very controversial and very, how should I say, even hilarious and ridiculous places. And now the case of Kamala Harris, okay, because she is like the quintessential of everything I said about this type of feminism that is glamour feminism, that focuses on the aesthetics, you know, of feminism and champions women that are in power positions and are very emancipated from an individual point of view. Now, her record shows when she was DA of California, she was the one that incarcerated a lot of people. She was not personally, but the number of people of color that were put in jail during the time she was the DA of California grew, okay? The number was higher, and this is proven. Another thing very important about her is that she never branded herself as a child, you know, as this very nice little lady who is the daughter of an Indian immigrant. She was the tough lady when she was a DA. Now, what we saw here was a rebranding, what it's called in the PR industry, personal rebranding. So she was not presented to the public as the fearful and fearless DA that she was in California, but as this little girl, you know, she had this t-shirt, look at me, I am that girl, and she posted pictures with her being very young and her mother, and basically she rebranded herself as a liberal feminist, you know, using all these ideas of personal progress and of the idea of the United States offering each and every woman the possibility, you know, to come from India when you are 17 to build your future and give birth to the future vice president of the United States. What a wonderful story, isn't it? Isn't it inspiring? Because, you know, it has appeal to the public. People believe in it because they want to believe in something. And for most women, because I don't want to spoil their party, you know, I see them even in Romania actually being very happy about it. So when I come and said, look, there is more to this story, I feel like a bad witch that is coming, you know, to spoil the party of the ones who are being happy for her. And I'm sorry to be that, but this is the situation. I mean, I read today an article that Albena sent me that was written in The Guardian. It was unbelievable, Mika. It was everything feminism should not be about. It was, what do you think? About pearls, about how these women wears pearls and why are they important. And keep in mind that the H&M, I don't want to to promote them, but there was this brand that recently decided to make pearls wearable in public and by everyday people. And that information was, you know, dropped in the article, and this was in The Guardian. I mean, it is unbelievable that a left-wing publication would stoop to this type of shallow, stupid advertorials where Kamala Harris was used as, it is called in PR because I teach PR, it is called the brand messenger of pearls, you know? And it is also because neoliberalism has this way of eventually swallowing, you know, feminism and use it as a tool to promote, you know, in this case, pearls. Tomorrow you will see a discussion about Dolce Gabbana because she wears Dolce Gabbana. You understand? It is unbelievable how the capitalist system managed to transform feminism in a sort of thing that suits the interest of the elite, you know. And when she was asked, are you going to give Joe Biden some advice regarding social measures and social policies that he would eventually have to take, she said, no, I would give him the personal perspective of a woman of color whose mother came here when she was 17. So she was basically obsessively transforming the political into a personal matter, you know, and to something so shallow. And so when I say shallow, I mean it has no consistent and no real impact on our lives as women. I would prefer somebody who is white, who is male, but who gives the American women free maternity leave. Because in the end, what matters are the results. And while you can be inspired, and I do not deny that, you can be inspired that a woman of color is such, she's handsome, energetic, young, that a woman like her is vice president. At the end of the day, you have to look, what are the real results of her being there? Do we have Medicare for all? Can I go to the hospital even if I'm unemployed right now because of the pandemic and get free assistance from my child for me if I am sick and I haven't paid my insurance? Do I have free daycare or preschool? Do I have that? Do I have free maternity leave? Because you see, these are things that here in Eastern Europe we take for granted, but in the United States they don't have them. So if you don't have that, how is it important that she wears pearls? You are being fed this type of glamour fantasy, while in fact, when you look at the real results, you get nothing. Isn't it interesting how they colonized and monopolized feminism and transformed it into something that serves the elites and not the masses. And this is very sad, because feminism at the beginning, when the women's liberation movement began, it was a movement for the working American women, for all the women. While now this type of glamour feminism, you can see that it is only for the elites. Because yes, some privileged girl in the US that sees Kamala Harris and she's very outspoken and she goes to the best schools might be inspired to become vice president. Okay. But the rest and the working women that are struggling, what's in this for them? What do they gain? What are the real results for them? Okay. I can go on for hours, you know, because I have.
I want to say that to your channel, the Barricade, you invite me to speak something about the perspective of the immigrant worker in the France, and I said about the work which was made by the men. I said about the most of Poles who are in France, they worked in the building industry, or there are truck drivers. But I totally forgotten about the women who are in the emigration, and also women who came from the Eastern countries are very specialized jobs. So they work for the cleanings very often. Very often they work for the babysittings. And also, it is very complicated to say, but in 1990s, in France, we had the word "femme de l'Est." Femme de l'Est, it's mean woman who came from the East. It was the synonym of the prostitute who came from the countries like Ukraine, but also Poland, also Bulgaria, also Romania. And in the 1990s, many of the prostitutes who works in the France was from Eastern Europe. And it is the reality of the liberation movement, women liberation in the France, that in one time we have the minister of the Madame Schiappa, who is in the government. She's responsible to the things that the equality entre women and the men, and she said many things. But in the other, we had all this reality which nobody speaks. Nobody speaks about all these women who every day came from Africa or from the other countries and made all these works who before was reserved from the French woman. Now they are all the time reserved for the woman, but not for the French woman, but the woman from the other countries. But all the time it is woman. And this difference under these jobs makes by women and these jobs makes by men is that these jobs made by men are hard, but it's well paid. This job made by women, cleaning or babysitting, it's hard and it is not well paid. And it is, and also we have all this disrespectful for the liberal elites. I want to say about the example of the Polish journalist, very famous. His name is Kuba Wojewódzki. And he in the life when he was speaking in the radio, he was joking about the Ukrainian robots for cleanings. That in Poland we have a lot of women who clean the houses, and he make jokes about this. That this is not the people, this is not the woman, this is the robot who cleans.
Yes, well, you see, this is the problem. Oh, I think I have my image I don't know. I see myself in the fog right now.
Yeah, I also like you a little.
A few minutes because I moved a little and now I can see.
No,
Oh,
it's good. It's good.
I came back. So the problem is that, as I see it, and all you said is very sad, and at the same time, it is very infuriating. But you see, we are fed this type of feminism with pearls, glamour feminism, the aesthetics of feminism, and the idea that women have come so far because we are focusing only on the elites and we ignore the rest. Just like Sofia Nadezhda said during the 19th century, because it was even then the same problem. So unfortunately, this is the thing we don't have, and even in Romania. Now the feminist movement has lost the touch with the masses. The feminist movement is for rich, privileged intellectuals in universities and not for the working women, you know. And this was done with the help of the CIA. And I do not say that the CIA is responsible for everything, but they had their role because they had as objective. And I had read recently one chapter in Sarah Miller Harris's book on the CIA and the culture on the Congress for Cultural Freedom, because you know the archives from the CIA are now being made public, and she was able to document a very interesting chapter in the history of the CIA right at the beginning, when one of the proteges of Dulles, the first head of the CIA, came up with the idea that the right wingers in America are never going to defeat communism, and the ones that the CIA should back and rely on are the centrists and the ones that are anti-Soviet and anti-masses, you know. So they have basically two objectives: to sever the link between intellectuals and the Soviet Union and to make them critical of that, and they perfectly succeeded. And the second one was more important, and we see its effect, its results even today, was the idea that they had to sever the link between the leftists and the working people. That was very important. And to transform, you know, the leftist movement into a women's only movement. You know, they have this idea that only women can talk about women's rights, and we have to self-represent ourselves, and we have to be here alone in our little bubble. Then you have another bubble of anti-racists. Only people of color can discuss anti-racism and racism. Only people of color should be here. So you have another little bubble of leftists and activists, you know? So you had the LGBT community, and then you had the lesbians and the transsexuals and the gay people. And then you have these little bubbles, you know, that are separated. And their main constituency are people that are privileged, and nothing about class. CIA had this particular idea of extracting class from this type of movements, you know, and made them focus only on human rights. And this is the result right now. What we are seeing right now is this focus on individual choice. All you see right now, especially in feminism, is choice. Choice is her choice. She chose, but she chose to become a prostitute. She chose to become a cleaning lady and a robot from Ukraine. It was her decision. If you try to speak against this oppression, you are infantilizing her. You are taking her as a victim. And when you discuss about these women as victims, you pose yourself in a privileged position, and you should give them the possibility to speak. As if Marx, when he discussed about the oppression of workers, he was in a way treating workers as stupid children and disrespect them. Do you understand? You cannot discuss a system of oppression because you are not talking about real persons and women, and you should. And while I completely agree, when you discuss migration, you have to discuss with migrants. When you discuss cleaning ladies going abroad, you have to discuss and to talk to them. Okay, they should not be an abstract category, but at the same time, that should not prevent you from looking at the structural causes that make those women go there. Because while the liberals are entirely right to say that you choose, it is your responsibility, but you choose from the options that the society gives you. You are not choosing in abstract. It is not like I say in the morning, I am a worker, a poor woman from Ukraine, and you sit in the morning and you think to yourself, what should I do today? Should I go to with my yacht in Tenerife, or should I go work as a cleaning lady in France? Oh, why don't I go and work as a cleaning lady in France? Does this seem like a plausible narrative to you? Because it doesn't seem like one to me. I mean, I think she's choosing, but she's choosing from the options that the society gives her, you know? This doesn't say that she's this stupid individual that went there because she was not able to make other choices, but because there were not other options for her, you know, in her country. I mean, she had to choose between starving, option number A, and work as a cleaning lady in France, option number B. You know, it is not like she had this wonderful array of possibilities just standing there in front of her, you know, and they are talking like this is the situation, you know, like these people, they choose to be there. They choose from what options? What are the options? Let's see what are the options and then talk about choosing. And we also had in Romania, you know, this article about by a British journalist, a woman that wrote it, that said that migrant Romanian laborers working in agriculture decided to go and do work in agriculture, even though it was a pandemic and it was very dangerous for them, because they chose. It was their freedom. I mean, come on, freedom. I mean, how do you understand this type of freedom? You know, because of course they are not idiots. Okay, they are not guided. They are not in chains, beaten up with baseball bats to go there. But you cannot deny the violence of the economic, you know, inequality that makes them go there. It is not like somebody came to you and started to beat you up to go to France to work, but you had no money. So that was basically the equivalent of forcing you to do that, you know. And this is very perverse, you know, when they say, oh, you should not talk about migrant prostitutes. You should talk about them not as trafficked persons, but as migrant sex workers, because it is their choice to go there and support the family. Really? But how come no rich woman decides to do that, since it's such a nice profession, you know? How come there is almost not only in the movie of Buñuel, you find, you know, La Belle de Jour with Catherine Deneuve, and she goes to prostitute herself even though she's rich. But this is a fantasy, you know. This is not something that really happens or on a regular basis in our daily lives. So how can you discuss from this? You discuss from a privileged position saying that they have a choice. Of course, you always have a choice, but you also have to look at the options. What are the options that you are choosing from? Because this is also very, very important. And Gail Dines has a wonderful, I will also give you the links, and for those who want to go further with the research and to go deeper into what I'm saying here, is Gail Dines has a wonderful video about how neoliberalism defanged feminism. And she discusses exactly how feminism was transformed from a women's liberation movement into a choice, into a lifestyle, into something glamorous for the privileged ones, and not a struggle, you know, a common struggle along with men to escape this oppressive system. But I will also have to say here, because you see, things are very complicated. And while I know that we academics might be boring, it is very important also to have nuances. Because women wanted to go along with men in leftist movements back in the 70s and to change the system. But the men were very sexist and mean to them, unfortunately. So we have to take also this into consideration. It was not only them that were, you know, guided into this direction of liberal feminism, but it was also men from leftist organizations that behaved terribly to them and pushed them away. And it is very interesting because men saw them as a threat. Because right from the beginning, when they wanted to enter the workforce, they were seen as a threat. And especially in IT, for instance, I read a wonderful book about the history of IT. You should have seen, Mikhail, the letters men wrote in order for women not to gain equal pay for equal work. Because they said they do not have to support the families. Why give them that? And if you give them that, they would no longer want to become our wives. Don't give them the equal salary, you know? And they were literally writing back in the 60s letters like that, you know, to the government and to the managers to prevent women from advancing, you see? So things are a little complicated here, because women who say that, look, we have to stick with ourselves because men will never understand and support us, may have a point, unfortunately. So this idea that we'll all come together, men and women, and the whole identity politics should be brushed away because it's stupid, well, it is until it's not, you know, until you find yourself wanting to you know, work alongside with men and they prove to be very misogynistic and very sexist and exclude you from their struggle, you know. And even back in the 30s, the unions that were formed by men were terrible to women because they saw them as a threat in the United States, for instance. So if things are complicated, it is equally true that in the 70s, right before Margaret Thatcher came to power, that was a struggle of the Indian workers, women, Indian workers that worked in the film trimming industry, and they were very, very low paid, and they had no stable working contract, and they were migrants, young Indian women, migrants in London. And what happened is that they started to strike, and then the miners came along, that were mainly men. And then first there were the postmen, their union came along and supported them. And then the miners came. What a moment, you know? That is something to be inspired by and to wish for, you know? When you can leave aside the differences because she's a woman, she's from India, and you come to support because she's a worker before being a woman and an Indian, and you relate to that identity of hers, you know? It is very important to have this type, and that was a wonderful moment. I often discuss that with my students and with other people, because I think that was one of the best moments, if you'd ask me, even though it ended in a disaster after all, because Margaret Thatcher came and she literally crushed the union movement, but that was like the peak, you know, of the workers coming together, regardless of their religion, ethnic background, gender, and so on and so forth. Don't you find that inspiring? I mean, you had the group of women from India, and then you had these huge unions that came and support them. Very inspiring moment. Then I think that should be the future. Because even if I am an intellectual laborer, I still see myself as an intellectual laborer. I don't see myself as an academic. I see myself as something that has to work, sometimes a lot of hours, and the payment is not good, and it's not good all the time. Right now it's not good. If I think a little closer to it, and I have nowhere to complain, you know, because we have no union. And while it is so, because things are tricky, this is the last anecdote that I want to say here. Things are trickier. That kind of moment at Brunswick strike that I talked about is unique in a way, because otherwise, you know, it is so easy to make people to hate each other and to relate it to each other as workers. I mean, I was just here in my yard, just cleaning the terrace, when a huge truck came, and the drivers and other men were able to see in the yard. I was properly dressed. I was normally dressed, because this is the, you know, how people treat this type of abuse. How did you look? And they started, you know, catcalling me. And at that point, I was literally filing some sort of complaint online in order to raise the salaries of the drivers, you know. But at that point, when they start catcalling me, I wanted, you know, to kind of strangle them because they treated me so badly, you know. It is very difficult, especially for us women, because you see, even though I was on their side and I was fighting for their salaries, they had no way of knowing. They saw in me a piece of meat, and they wanted me to understand how they saw me, you know, at that particular point of the day. So it makes things very complicated, because you will have to fight also with this type of misogyny and backwards mentality, and also with the oppressive system. And while I would want to work with them, I don't think they would want to work with me, you know? And that's sad. What do you think?
I think that these things which you said now, it is degradation of the mentality of the Eastern Europe workers. That in Poland, I think that before in Polish socialists, this mentality was different. But when the people starting to emigrate, when the people starting, everybody, because when you emigrate and you are married, but many times you are not with your wife, you are with your friends, from your colleagues from work. These migrant workers made many stupid things, and all these things which we see in the public, the pornography, prostitutes, alcoholism. It's not only bourgeoisie who use it; it's also working class use it. And this capitalism profits this all this situation, and for the capitalist system, it's a very good situation when the working people, working men and working women, are not united.
Hmm. Yes, I know. I know. When we have to keep in mind that moment, the Brunswick strike, when workers came together regardless of their backgrounds and they fought together. I think this is very important, and this is why this is something that we should. It's like an ideal, something to look for in our current struggles, because I think this is the only way out, but it is not an individual way out, because what we are seeing now and what liberal feminism is telling us is a way to liberate yourself as a woman, as an individual. But we have to look for a common way out. We have to all progress and emancipate. We have to reject this system that pits one against another and offers individual emancipation. We have to look for collective liberation, and this can only be done if we understand that we have to come together in common struggles, as regardless of our identities.
Yes, but I want to add one thing before we finish, that in the same time when you speak about the activity of the CIA in the feminist movement and leftist movement, we have to remember about the support the CIA for the movement like the Mujahedin in Afghanistan, or the Polish Solidarity, which was force of the Polish Catholic Church. And I can give one example, that when Wałęsa came to Paris and he speak with the trade unions from the CGT, the femme from the CGT asked him like a question: what is your strategy for the Polish woman? And Wałęsa answer, I think that women have to stay in the kitchen. It is after contribution made by Solidarity, they maybe they don't stay in the kitchen, but they made the abortion illegal and many other things. But then in Afghanistan was much worse. That in 1970s was the school when the Afghan woman can go learn, and today it is forbidden for the Afghan woman. If women go to school, she can be attacked by the psychopath who can destroy her face and many stuff like this. And it was built by the CIA.
Well, there are nefarious things that they did, absolutely horrible. And while I think it is very important to have this discussion, I know about the feminists because this is my main topic, but I also read about what you said. And it is important because we have to avoid the pitfalls and the traps that were prepared for the left in the past by these organizations. And it is a very important chapter that not many people debate. And I think it is very important because you see, Mikhail, you would have seen this Gloria Steinem and you would have thought that, look, she's great because in 1966 she went to Playboy as an undercover, and then she wrote an article about how bad those individuals treated the women. So she became famous in trying to, and it was also a secretary and that gained access to an internal memo where Hugh Hefner said, the feminists are our natural enemy. We want to keep this world of boys and girls, and they do not. They are our enemies. We have to come against them with all we've got. It is very interesting, you see. So you would have thought that she's great, but then when you see that there are these subtle things that she promoted that were in the best interest, while being very glamorous, because this is the clever move, while being very glamorous and very interesting and very appealing, at the same time keeping the status quo.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that we only started discussion. There are many, because
Many.
now I have in my that I need to make interview with women who work in France in this, but thank you very much for all things which you said, and see you next time.
Bye.